Marcus Chun had always known he was different from his classmates at Galactic University. While the other students floated, slithered, or gracefully moved through the corridors with their various appendages, Marcus walked on two legs with heavy footsteps that echoed through the halls. His fellow students would often pause their conversations when he passed, their multiple eyes, sensors, or other sensory organs tracking his movement with what he had learned to recognize as a mixture of fascination and barely concealed fear. The biology lecture hall was massive, designed to accommodate the diverse array of species that made up the student body. Crystalline beings from Zephyria hung from the ceiling in specialized harnesses, their bodies refracting light into beautiful rainbow patterns. The slug-like molluscans occupied the lower levels, their translucent bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that Marcus had learned was their form of note-taking. Avian species from a dozen different worlds perched on specially designed branches that extended from the walls, their feathers rustling softly as they shifted position. Marcus took his usual seat in the middle section, a reinforced chair designed to handle what the university administration politely termed high-gravity species requirements. The chair was one of only 3 in the entire hall, and the other 2 had never been used. He was, as far as anyone knew, the only student from a death world currently enrolled in the prestigious xenobiology program. Professor Kethvara, a tall, elegant being from Serenity Prime, began the day's lesson with her usual melodious voice that seemed to resonate at frequencies that made most species feel calm and peaceful. Her skin was a pale blue-green that shifted slightly in hue as she spoke, a sign of emotional state that Marcus had learned to read over his 2 years at the university. Today, class, we will be examining predator-prey relationships in extreme environments, Professor Kevara announced, her skin shifting to a more excited purple tone. We will observe live specimens to better understand the behavioral patterns that emerge in high-stress survival situations. A collective rustle went through the classroom. Live specimens were rare in biology classes, as most species found the sight of predation deeply disturbing. The Galactic Council had strict guidelines about exposure to violent imagery, considering most member species to be highly sensitive to such displays. Marcus noticed several of his classmates shifting uncomfortably. Jala, a delicate crystalline being who sat near him, actually chimed softly in what Marcus had learned was her species' equivalent of nervous laughter. Her usually steady light patterns flickered erratically. The specimen we will observe today, Professor Kethvara continued, is from the world of Zirian Prime, a Category 3 hostile environment. The creature is what Zirionians call a shadow stalker, though the scientific designation is Umbra fellinis Zirius. The lights in the lecture hall dimmed, and a large transparent containment unit was wheeled into the center of the room. Inside, barely visible in the artificial twilight, was a creature about the size of a large dog. Its fur was so dark it seemed to absorb light, and its eyes glowed with an eerie green luminescence. The creature moved with liquid grace, pacing the boundaries of its enclosure with what Marcus immediately recognized as the restless energy of a caged predator. Most of the class fell silent. Marcus could hear the rapid breathing of several species, the nervous chittering of the insectoid hive minds, and the soft humming that the energy beings made when distressed. Now, Professor Kithvara said, her voice taking on a more clinical tone as her skin shifted to a focused yellow, we will introduce prey into the environment to observe natural hunting behaviors. This will help us understand how predators adapt their strategies based on environmental factors and prey responses. A small, rabbit-like creature was introduced into the enclosure through a secure feeding port. The moment it appeared, the shadow stalker froze, every muscle in its dark body tensing. The prey animal, sensing danger, immediately began to panic, hopping frantically around the enclosure in search of escape. What happened next caused chaos in the lecture hall. The shadow stalker moved with lightning speed, covering the distance to its prey in a single fluid motion. Its claws extended, razor-sharp and gleaming as it pounced. The kill was swift and efficient over in seconds, but the psychological impact on the classroom was immediate and dramatic. Gila's crystalline form began to resonate with a high-pitched whine that hurt Marcus's ears. Several of the molluscans immediately retracted into their shells, their bioluminescence fading to almost nothing. The avian species took flight in panic, their emergency calls echoing through the hall as they sought higher perches. But it was the ethereal beings that had the most extreme reaction. These gaseous entities, normally calm and philosophical, began to emit distress pheromones that quickly filled the air with the scent of ozone and burnt metal. Two of them actually dispersed entirely, their consciousness fleeing their physical forms in terror. Professor Kethvara's skin immediately shifted to a deep red of alarm. Please, class, remain calm. This is a natural biological process. There is nothing to fear. But her words were lost in the chaos. Students were fleeing the lecture hall in droves, their various forms of locomotion creating a traffic jam at the exits. The hive minds were clicking and buzzing in panic languages that the universal translators couldn't process fast enough. Even some of the more stoic rock-based beings were grinding against each other in distress, creating small earthquakes in their section of the hall. Marcus sat perfectly still, watching the predator in the enclosure with professional interest. The shadow stalker had already begun feeding, tearing into its prey with methodical precision. Its movements were economical, wasting no energy, displaying the kind of evolutionary efficiency that could only come from millions of years of life-or-death hunting. He found himself analyzing the creature's technique, noting the way it positioned its body to maintain awareness of its surroundings even while feeding, the manner in which it used its claws to hold the prey in the optimal position, the surgical precision of its bites to access the most nutritious parts first. It was only when Professor Kethvara called his name for the third time that Marcus realized the lecture hall had almost entirely emptied around him. "Mr. Chun," she called again, her skin now a worried shade of deep purple. "Are you quite all right? Do you require medical attention?" Marcus looked around, suddenly aware that he was one of only 4 students remaining in the entire hall. The others were a silicon-based being who didn't seem to have any reaction to biological processes, a plant person whose species apparently found predation as natural as photosynthesis, and a small reptilian creature that seemed to be taking detailed notes with multiple appendages. "I'm fine, Professor," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the now quiet hall. "It's just a predator doing what predators do. It's actually quite beautiful from a biological standpoint." Professor Kethvara stared at him, her skin cycling through several colors that Marcus had never seen before. "Beautiful," she repeated, her melodious voice cracking slightly. "Mr. Chun, that creature just killed and consumed another living being. How can you find that beautiful?" Marcus stood up slowly, his movement causing Professor Kethvara to take an involuntary step backward. He had noticed this reaction before, but had never understood it until this moment. To his classmates and professors, he wasn't just a student from a high-gravity world. He was something else entirely. "Professor," Marcus said carefully, "may I approach the enclosure? I think I can help explain some of the behavioral patterns you were trying to demonstrate." Professor Kethvara's skin flickered between colors rapidly, a sign of deep internal conflict. That is, the safety protocols. I understand the protocols," Marcus said, moving slowly toward the containment unit. "I've read them all. There are 3 barriers between the specimen and the classroom, including an energy field that could stop a charging Graxner. I just want to observe more closely." As Marcus approached the enclosure, something extraordinary happened. The shadow stalker, which had been focused entirely on its meal, suddenly lifted its head and looked directly at him. Its glowing green eyes met Marcus's brown ones, and for a moment, something passed between them. The creature's body language changed instantly. Its casual feeding posture shifted to high alert, muscles tensing as if preparing for a fight. But there was no fear in its posture, no indication that it wanted to flee. Instead, it seemed to be assessing him. Marcus smiled, expression that he realized probably looked quite different to the alien observers than it would to another human. He had learned that many species found the sight of human teeth deeply disturbing, particularly when displayed in what humans considered a friendly expression. "Hello there, beautiful," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying the kind of tone he might use with a skittish cat. "You're quite the magnificent predator, aren't you?" The shadow stalker tilted its head, ears pricking forward. Its eyes never left Marcus's face, and slowly, very slowly, it moved closer to the inner barrier of the enclosure. Not the cautious approach of prey investigating a potential threat, but the confident stride of one apex predator acknowledging another. Behind him, Marcus heard Professor Kefera make a sound that the universal translator rendered as something between a gasp and a prayer. "Mr. Chun," she whispered, "please step away from the enclosure. That creature is exhibiting highly unusual behavior, and I don't think our safety measures were designed for." "For what, Professor?" Marcus asked, not taking his eyes off the shadow stalker. The creature had now positioned itself directly against the inner barrier, sitting in a pose that reminded Marcus strongly of a cat waiting to be petted. What weren't the safety measures designed for? The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Marcus could feel the weight of realization settling over the few remaining occupants of the lecture hall. Slowly, he turned to face Professor Kethvara. "You've never had a student from a Category 12 Death World before, have you?" he asked quietly. Professor Kethvara's skin had gone almost white, a color Marcus had never seen from her before. "Mr. Chun," she said carefully, "Earth is classified as Category 12 primarily due to gravitational and atmospheric extremes. The cultural classification profiles indicated that humans were a peaceful, herbivorous species with minimal aggressive tendencies." Marcus couldn't help himself. He laughed, a sound that in the echoing lecture hall sounded somehow both warm and terrifying. "Herbivorous," he repeated. "Professor, humans are omnivores. We're persistence hunters. Do you know what that means?" The professor shook her head, her skin now flickering between white and deep blue in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as fear. "It means that for hundreds of thousands of years, humans hunted by running our prey to exhaustion. We didn't need to be faster or stronger than what we hunted. We just needed to be more stubborn. We would follow our prey for days, sometimes weeks, never letting them rest, never letting them recover, until they literally collapsed from exhaustion. Then we would walk up to them and finish them off." Marcus turned back to the shadow stalker, which was watching this entire exchange with what he could only describe as fascination. "We're not the fastest or the strongest or the smartest predators on our planet, but we might be the most persistent, and we're definitely the most adaptable." He looked back at Professor Kefera, noting that she had moved to within reach of the emergency alarm. "Professor, you asked me how I could find that creature's behavior beautiful. It's because I recognize the artistry in it, the efficiency, the million years of evolution that created a perfect killing machine." Marcus paused, choosing his next words carefully. "On Earth, Professor, I'm not a predator. I'm just a guy who likes biology and managed to get a scholarship to study off-world. But compared to most species in the galaxy, every human is a predator. We come from a world where almost everything is trying to kill us, and we not only survived, we thrived. We became the dominant species not despite the danger, but because of it." The shadow stalker suddenly pressed closer to the barrier, and Marcus could swear he saw something like approval in its glowing eyes. "The reason your safety protocols weren't designed for this situation," Marcus continued, "is because you've never had to consider what happens when a predator from a Category 12 Death World meets a predator from a Category 3 hostile environment. You assumed I would react like all your other students because you categorize humans based on incomplete information." Professor Kethvara was now frankly staring at him, her skin cycling through colors so rapidly it was making Marcus slightly dizzy. "Mr. Chun, are you saying that you pose a danger to the class? Should I be activating security protocols?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I'm not dangerous to anyone here, Professor. I have no desire to hurt anyone, and I'm perfectly capable of controlling my instincts and impulses, but I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what humans are and where we come from. He gestured toward the enclosure, where the shadow stalker was now lying down against the barrier in a pose that looked remarkably relaxed. That creature recognizes me as something familiar. Not prey, not exactly a pack member, but something that understands the game. Something that speaks the same language, even if we've never met before. The few remaining students were watching this exchange with expressions that Marcus couldn't quite read on their alien features, but he suspected they were seeing him in an entirely new light. "Professor," Marcus said gently, "I think it might be time to update humanities classification in the university database, and maybe review the admission criteria for students from Deathworlds." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sounds of the shadow stalker settling down for a post-meal nap, apparently completely comfortable in the presence of the human who had somehow spoken its language without saying a word. Marcus realized that his time at Galactic University was about to become much more interesting. The news of what happened in Professor Kethvar's xenobiology class spread through Galactic University faster than a quantum transmission. By the time Marcus made it back to his dormitory, he could feel the changed atmosphere like a physical weight. Students who had previously offered polite nods or friendly greetings now watched him from safe distances, their various forms of communication creating a constant background buzz of nervous energy. Marcus's dormitory was located in the high-gravity section of the university, a specialized wing designed for species that required environmental conditions similar to their homeworlds. When he had first arrived, the housing administrator had seemed puzzled by his requirements, mentioning that the high-gravity wing was typically reserved for dangerous species, and that surely there had been some mistake in his classification. Now, as Marcus walked through the corridors, he was beginning to understand why. His neighbor, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros, had always been friendly in a reserved way. Graxel was from a Category 8 world, where the gravity was nearly twice Earth standard, and his species were known as formidable warriors. Despite his intimidating appearance, Graxel had always been gentle and soft-spoken, often sharing traditional foods from his homeworld and asking Marcus about human customs. When Marcus reached his door, he found Graxel waiting for him in the hallway, his massive frame filling most of the corridor. But something was different about his posture. Instead of the usual relaxed friendliness, Graxel was sitting in what Marcus recognized as a formal position of respect among his species. "Marcus Chon of Earth," Graxel said, using the full formal address that Marcus had never heard from him before. "May I speak with you?" "Of course, Graxel," Marcus replied, noting that several other doors in the corridor had opened slightly, with residents listening from the safety of their rooms. "Is everything all right?" Graxel's massive head tilted in what Marcus had learned was his species' equivalent of embarrassment. "I must apologize, friend Marcus. For 2 years, I have treated you as a soft skin from a gentle world. I offered you protection from the other high-gravity species, thinking you were misplaced among dangerous beings like myself." Marcus unlocked his door, gesturing for Graxel to follow him inside. The dormitory room was spacious by galactic standards, designed to accommodate large species, but it still felt cramped with Graxel's massive form inside. "You don't need to apologize for being friendly," Marcus said, settling into his desk chair. "I appreciated the kindness. But that is just it," Graxel said, his voice carrying a deep rumble that Marcus could feel in his bones. "It was not kindness. It was, how do you say, patronizing? I treated you like a child lost among adults, when in truth, I was the child who did not understand what I was seeing." Marcus studied his friend's expression. Graxel's species had limited facial mobility, but Marcus had learned to read the subtle signals in his ear position and the way his massive hands moved. Right now, everything about Graxel's body language suggested deep respect, mixed with something that might have been awe. "Graxel, what exactly have you heard about what happened in class today?" "The crystalline beings are saying you communed with a shadow stalker through the barriers," Graxel said, The molluskins claim you spoke the hunting language and calmed a wild predator with your presence. The energy beings are theorizing that humans possess some form of psychic dominance over lesser predators. Marcus couldn't help but smile. And what do you think? Graxel was quiet for a long moment, his massive hands folding and unfolding in a nervous gesture. I think, he said finally, that I have never seen what humans truly are. In my culture, we have stories of the great hunters, being so in tune with the hunt that they could speak to the prey and predator alike. We thought these were myths. They probably are myths, Graxel. What happened today wasn't magic or psychic powers. It was just recognition. That creature and I recognized something similar in each other. Yes, Graxel said, nodding slowly. That is what makes it so remarkable. On my homeworld, Marcus, I am considered a gentle intellectual. I chose to study linguistics and cultural exchange rather than follow the traditional warrior paths. But even I can recognize a predator when I see one. The difference is that until today, I did not see it in you. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering his friend's words. What do you see now? I see why they put you in the high-gravity wing, Graxel said simply. Not because you need the gravity, but because you belong with the dangerous species. I see why you never seemed intimidated by the others who live here, beings who terrify most of the galaxy. I see why you move the way you do, always aware of your surroundings, always ready. Always ready for what? For whatever comes next, Graxel said. It is the posture of a being who has survived by being prepared for anything. We have that posture too, but we are obvious about it. You humans hide it so well that even we dangerous beings do not see it until it is revealed. A soft chime indicated that Marcus had received a message on his personal communication device. The message was from Professor Kethvara, requesting that he attend a meeting the following morning with the university administration. The tone was formal, but not hostile, and Marcus suspected he wasn't in trouble so much as he had created a situation that required official attention. I think I'm about to become famous for all the wrong reasons, Marcus said, showing Graxel the message. Or perhaps for all the right reasons, Graxel countered. Marcus, do you understand what it means that you remain calm while everyone else fled in terror? Do you comprehend the implications of the fact that a Category 3 predator treated you as an equal rather than as prey? Marcus shook his head. I'm beginning to realize I don't understand the implications of much of anything that happened today. Graxel stood, his massive form casting shadows across the room. Then, perhaps it is time you learn more about how the rest of the galaxy views predation, hunting, and violence. And perhaps it is time the rest of the galaxy learn more about humans. After Graxel left, Marcus spent the evening researching galactic classification systems for species and worlds. What he discovered was both enlightening and disturbing. The Galactic Council species classification system was based on a complex matrix of factors, including technological development, social organization, environmental adaptation, and something called aggression indices. Most member species of the Galactic Council scored very low on aggression indices. The average was around 2.3 on a scale of 10, with most species falling between 1.5 and 3.0. Even the so-called warrior species like Graxel's people typically scored no higher than 4.5. The classification system seemed designed around the assumption that successful civilizations would naturally evolve away from aggressive tendencies. Humans, according to the database, have been given a provisional aggression index of 2.1 based on their apparent social cooperation and the peaceful nature of their first contact protocols. Marcus stared at this number for a long time, thinking about human history, human sports, human entertainment, and human responses to threats. He pulled up Earth's actual history files, the ones that had been submitted to the Galactic Council as part of humanity's application for membership. As he read through the carefully sanitized accounts of human civilization, Marcus began to understand the scope of the misunderstanding. The human diplomats who had made first contact had apparently presented humanity as a peaceful, cooperative species that had overcome its aggressive tendencies through social evolution and technological advancement. They had emphasized human achievements in art, science, and cooperation while downplaying what they probably saw as humanity's less appealing aspects. There was no mention of the fact that humans had invented dozens of different ways to kill each other efficiently. No discussion of the fact that human entertainment included ritualized combat sports, horror movies, and competitive activities that would terrify most galactic species. No analysis of the fact that humans had somehow turned warfare itself into an art form, complete with strategies, tactics, and technologies specifically designed for conflict. Marcus found himself wondering what would happen if the Galactic Council discovered that humans had actually achieved interstellar travel during a period of active warfare, that Earth's space program had been developed partly as a continuation of military competition between human nations, and that even now, in the era of galactic cooperation, humans maintained military forces that could probably conquer half the galaxy if they chose to. The more he read, the more he realized that the human representatives hadn't exactly lied to the Galactic Council. They had simply presented the version of humanity that they thought would be most acceptable to a galaxy full of peaceful, cooperative species. They had emphasized human potential for cooperation and downplayed human capacity for violence, probably hoping that exposure to galactic civilization would encourage humanity's better angels. But Marcus was beginning to suspect that this approach might have been a mistake. The next morning, Marcus made his way to the administrative building, a gleaming spire that rose from the center of the university campus like a crystalline tree. The architecture was designed to be welcoming to all species, with multiple entry points, varying gravity fields, and environmental zones suited to different atmospheric requirements. The receptionist was a delicate, flower-like being whose species Marcus didn't recognize. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes, beautiful and melodious. Marcus Chun of Earth? Dean Vorthak is waiting for you in Conference Chamber 7. Please follow the blue guidance lights. The guidance lights led Marcus through corridors filled with artwork from hundreds of different worlds, past windows that looked out onto gardens where plants from across the galaxy grew in carefully maintained environmental bubbles. It was a beautiful place designed to celebrate the diversity and wonder of galactic civilization. Conference Chamber 7 was a large, circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the space above the university. Seated around a curved table were 5 beings that Marcus recognized as senior university administrators, including Professor Kethvara and Dean Vorthak, a tall, ethereal being whose species was known for their wisdom and fairness. Mr. Chun, Dean Vorthak said as Marcus entered, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. Please take a seat. We have much to discuss. Marcus chose a chair across from the administrators, noting that everyone at the table was maintaining what he was beginning to recognize as respectful but cautious distance. Even Professor Kethvara, who had worked with him for 2 years, seemed to be seeing him differently than she had just 24 hours before. Mr. Chun, Dean Vorthak continued, yesterday's incident in Professor Kethvara's class has raised some important questions about our understanding of human psychology and behavior. We were hoping you could help us clarify a few things. Of course, Marcus said. I'll answer any questions you have. Dean Vorthak's form shifted slightly, colors flowing through his translucent body in patterns that Marcus had learned indicated careful thought. Mr. Chun, when you filled out your application for admission to this university, you indicated that humans are a peaceful species with minimal aggressive tendencies. Would you say the description is accurate? Marcus considered his answer carefully. I would say it's incomplete. Humans are capable of both great cooperation and great conflict. We can be peaceful, but we're also adapted for survival in a very dangerous environment. The biological assessment submitted by Earth's diplomatic corps indicated that humans are primarily herbivorous with occasional omnivorous tendencies, another administrator said, consulting a datapad. Is this accurate? No, Marcus said simply. Humans are obligate omnivores. We require both plant and animal nutrition to maintain optimal health. And our ancestors were hunters long before they were farmers. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Marcus could see the administrators exchanging glances, their various forms of communication creating a subtle backdrop of nervous energy. Mr. Chun, Professor Kethvaris said quietly, are you saying that the information provided by Earth's diplomatic representatives was inaccurate? Marcus chose his words very carefully. I think Earth's representatives emphasized the aspects of humanity that they thought would be most compatible with galactic civilization. They weren't lying, but they weren't telling the complete truth either. Dean Vorthak leaned forward, his ethereal form condensing slightly. What would be the complete truth, Mr. Chun? Marcus looked around the table at the 5 beings who were trying to understand what humanity really was. These were some of the most intelligent, educated, and wise beings in the galaxy, representatives of civilizations that had achieved things humanity could barely dream of. But there were also beings who had evolved on worlds where cooperation was more advantageous than competition, where intelligence was more useful than aggression, where survival didn't depend on the ability to kill or be killed. The complete truth, Marcus said, is that humans come from a world where almost everything is trying to kill us, and we not only survived, we became the dominant species. We are persistence predators, pack hunters, and tool makers. We bond with other predators, domesticate prey animals, and turn competition into cooperation when it serves our purposes. We're not evil or malicious, but we are dangerous in ways that most galactic species probably can't even imagine. The administrators stared at him with expressions that Marcus was beginning to recognize as a mixture of fascination and terror. And Marcus continued, I think it's time the galaxy knew what humans really are. The emergency session of the Galactic Council Xenobiology Committee convened 3 days after Marcus's meeting with the university administration. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Great Crystal Chamber on Nexus Prime, their varied forms creating a symphony of colors, sounds, and movements that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Marcus sat in a specially reinforced chair in the center of the chamber, feeling like a specimen under examination. Around him, beings that represented some of the oldest and most advanced civilizations in the galaxy whispered, chimed, and transmitted their concerns in languages that made his universal translator work overtime. Dean Vorthak had accompanied Marcus as an advocate, and his ethereal form provided a small sense of comfort in the intimidating environment. But Marcus could see the worry in the Dean's shifting colors, the uncertainty in his movements that suggested even he wasn't sure what the outcome of this gathering might be. The committee chair, an ancient crystalline being known as the Harmonic of Truth, resonated with a tone that brought immediate silence to the chamber. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound like singing crystal that somehow conveyed perfect understanding in every language simultaneously. We gather today to address a matter of galactic security and species classification, the Harmonic of Truth announced. The species known as Homo sapiens, originating from the world-designated Sol 3 or Earth, appears to have been fundamentally misclassified in our databases. This misclassification may have implications for the safety and security of all member species. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled representatives. Marcus noticed that several of them had moved their chairs slightly farther away from his position since the session began. Human Representative Marcus Chun, the Harmonic of Truth, continued. You have been brought before this committee to provide testimony regarding the true nature of your species. Do you understand the gravity of these proceedings? Marcus stood, feeling the weight of history settling on his shoulders. I understand that this committee is trying to determine whether humanity poses a threat to galactic civilization. I'm here to provide honest answers to any questions you might have. The Harmonic of Truth pulsed with colors that Marcus's translator indicated meant approval. Very well. Let us begin with the incident that brought this matter to our attention. Please describe in your own words what occurred in the xenobiology laboratory. Marcus recounted the events in Professor Kethvaris' class, describing his reaction to the Shadow Stalker and the creature's response to him. As he spoke, he watched the assembled representatives, noting their various forms of body language and the way they reacted to different parts of his story. When he finished, the chamber was silent except for the soft background hum of translation systems working to process the implications of what they had heard. You described the killing and consumption of one creature by another as beautiful, said a representative from the Serenity Collective, a species known for their philosophy of absolute pacifism. How do you reconcile this appreciation for violence with humanity's claimed status as a civilized species? Marcus considered the question carefully. I think there's a misunderstanding about what I found beautiful. I wasn't celebrating death or violence. I was appreciating the efficiency, the evolutionary perfection, the millions of years of natural selection that created a creature perfectly adapted to its ecological role. It's the same kind of beauty I might see in a perfectly designed machine or an elegant mathematical equation. But you felt no distress at witnessing the death of a living creature, pressed another representative. I felt no more distress than you might feel watching a plant photosynthesize, Marcus replied. It was a natural process, necessary for the predator's survival. The prey animal lived its entire life, knowing that it might one day become food. The predator killed quickly and efficiently, minimizing suffering. From a biological perspective, it was actually a very humane death. The chamber erupted in a chaos of sounds as representatives tried to process this answer. Marcus realized that he had just demonstrated one of the fundamental differences between human psychology and that of most galactic species. The harmonic of truth restored order with a resonant tone. Human Marcus Chun, are you saying that your species views predation as morally acceptable? I'm saying that we view it as morally neutral, Marcus replied. Predation is neither good nor evil. It simply is. It's a biological process that evolved because it serves important ecological functions. Predators prevent prey populations from overwhelming their environments. Weak and sick prey animals are removed from the gene pool, and the constant pressure of predation drives evolutionary adaptation. And where do humans fit in this predator-prey relationship? Asked a representative Marcus didn't recognize. Humans are apex predators, Marcus said simply. We evolved to hunt, to track, to kill efficiently, and to work together to bring down prey much larger and more powerful than ourselves individually. We're also omnivores, which means we can adapt to almost any environment by eating whatever is available. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus could see the representatives struggling to reconcile this information with their understanding of civilization and social development. But humans have developed agriculture, have they not? Asked the Serenity Collective representative. Surely this indicates an evolution beyond predatory behavior? Marcus smiled, realizing that this question revealed another fundamental misunderstanding. Agriculture didn't replace hunting for humans. It supplemented it. We domesticated prey animals so we could have a reliable source of meat. We cultivated plants so we could support larger populations of hunters. Agriculture made us more effective predators, not less. You're describing a species that seems fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization, said a representative from the Harmony Worlds. How can beings with such predatory instincts coexist peacefully with prey species? The same way we've coexisted peacefully with prey species on Earth for thousands of years, Marcus replied. Humans are social predators. We form complex relationships, not just with our own species, but with other species as well. We've domesticated wolves, turning them into dogs that live in our homes as family members. We've formed working partnerships with horses, birds of prey, and dozens of other species. We're capable of seeing other beings as partners, allies, or friends rather than just potential prey. But what about species that you cannot form partnerships with? Pressed the Harmony World's representative. What about beings that serve no useful purpose to humanity? Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, sensors, or optical organs of as many representatives as he could. The same thing we do with species on Earth that serve no useful purpose to us. We study them, we protect them, we find them interesting. Humans have spent enormous resources protecting species that are completely useless to us simply because we think they're worth preserving. We have laws against hunting certain animals, not because they're dangerous or valuable, but because we've decided they deserve protection. You speak of protection and partnership, said the harmonic of truth, but what of conquest and dominance? Are these not also predatory behaviors? Marcus nodded. They can be. Humans are capable of both cooperation and competition, sometimes simultaneously. We compete with each other constantly, in sports, in business, in politics, but we also cooperate on massive scales when we need to. The same instincts that make us effective hunters also make us effective at working together to achieve common goals. And what happens when human goals conflict with the goals of other species? Asked Dean Vorthak quietly. It was the question Marcus had been dreading, because it struck at the heart of the real concern. Historically, he said carefully, when human interests have conflicted irreconcilably with other species, the other species have usually lost. We're very good at removing obstacles to our survival and success. The chamber fell silent again, and Marcus could feel the weight of fear settling over the assembled representatives. However, Marcus continued, humans are also very good at finding ways to make our interests align with the interests of others. We prefer cooperation to conflict when possible, because cooperation usually produces better outcomes for everyone involved. The question isn't whether humans are dangerous. We are. The question is whether we can be trusted to use that danger responsibly. And can you be? Asked the harmonic of truth. Marcus looked around the chamber one more time, at beings representing civilizations that had achieved wonders humanity could barely imagine. I think the answer to that question isn't something I can provide alone. It's something that humanity and the rest of the galaxy will have to discover together. He paused, then added, but I will say this. Humans have been living alongside other intelligent species on Earth for thousands of years. We've learned to coexist with beings that are faster, stronger, smarter, or more specialized than we are. We've learned to find value in diversity, to appreciate differences, and to protect things that are important even when they're not immediately useful to us. The Shadow Stalker recognized you as a fellow predator, Professor Kavura said suddenly. What does this mean for human interaction with other predatory species in the galaxy? Marcus smiled. It means we speak their language. Not literally, but we understand the rules they live by. We know what it means to hunt, to compete, to fight for survival. That doesn't mean we'll automatically be allies with every predatory species we meet, but it does mean we can communicate with them in ways that purely prey species might not be able to. And this is valuable how? Asked the Serenity Collective representative. Because, Marcus said, the galaxy isn't just full of peaceful, cooperative species. There are aggressive species out there, predatory civilizations that see other species as resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. When you encounter something like that, you need someone who understands their mindset, someone who can think like they think and predict what they'll do next. The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber. Marcus could see representatives exchanging glances, their various forms of communication creating a web of worried consultation. The harmonic of truth resonated with a tone that Marcus had learned indicated deep contemplation. Human Marcus Chun, you present us with a paradox. Your species appears to be simultaneously the greatest potential threat and the greatest potential asset to galactic civilization. Maybe that's exactly what you need, Marcus suggested. The galaxy has achieved an incredible level of peace and cooperation by bringing together species that complement each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. But what happens when you encounter something that doesn't want to cooperate? What happens when you meet a species that sees your peaceful nature as weakness to be exploited? You're suggesting that humanity could serve as a defensive force for galactic civilization, asked Dean Vorthak. I'm suggesting that diversity makes ecosystems stronger, Marcus replied. An ecosystem with only prey animals would collapse the moment a predator arrived from outside. But an ecosystem with its own predators is prepared for that challenge. The predators protect the ecosystem by being strong enough to face external threats. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives argued, questioned, and analyzed the implications of humanity's true nature. Some advocated for immediate quarantine of Earth and all human colonies. Others suggested careful integration with extensive monitoring. A few even proposed recruiting humans as a defensive force for the Galactic Council. Finally, the Harmonic of Truth called for silence. This committee cannot make a final decision on humanity's status without extensive consultation with our respective governments. However, we can make preliminary recommendations. The crystal being pulsed with colors that Marcus's translator indicated meant formal pronouncement. First, humanity's classification in the galactic database will be updated to reflect their true nature as apex predators from a Category 12 death world. Second, all human students, researchers, and visitors currently in galactic space will be reclassified as potentially dangerous but not immediately threatening. Third, formal negotiations will begin between the Galactic Council and Earth's government to establish new protocols for human integration into galactic civilization. The Harmonic paused, then added, and fourth, this committee recommends the establishment of a new category of galactic citizenship, protected predators. Species classified as protected predators will be granted full rights and privileges within galactic civilization, but with special responsibilities as defenders of the peace. Marcus felt a surge of emotion that he couldn't quite identify. Pride, relief, hope, and a dozen other feelings mixed together as he realized that the galaxy wasn't rejecting humanity, but was instead trying to find a way to make their dangerous nature into something positive. Human Marcus Chun, the Harmonic of Truth, said, "You have served your species well today. You have helped us understand that predators and prey can coexist not despite their differences, but because of them. The galaxy may be about to become a much more interesting place." As the session concluded and the representatives began to disperse, Marcus found himself surrounded by beings who had spent the day learning to see humanity in an entirely new light. Some still seemed wary, but others appeared curious, even excited about the possibilities that human integration might bring. Professor Kethvara approached him as he prepared to leave. "Mr. Chun," she said, her skin showing colors that indicated warm approval. "I believe I owe you an apology. I spent 2 years teaching you about predator-prey relationships without realizing I was teaching a predator about his own nature." "You didn't need to apologize, Professor," Marcus replied. "You helped me understand something important too. You showed me that being a predator doesn't mean being a monster. It just means being something different, something necessary." As Marcus walked through the crystal corridors of the Galactic Council building, he reflected on the day's events. Humanity had taken its first real steps into galactic civilization not by hiding what they were, but by revealing it. They had been accepted not despite being dangerous, but because their danger could serve a purpose. The Shadow Stalker had recognized him as a fellow predator, and in doing so, had helped the galaxy recognize that predators could be protectors as well as threats. It was a lesson that would change everything, not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy. And Marcus couldn't wait to see what came next.